You're listening to the world's smartest podcast network.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of episode 10. I'm your host, Andrea Jones-Roy, and we are here rejoining the conversation I had with my father, Robert Roy. I hope you enjoyed part 1, and if you haven't heard it, I'm pretty sure part 2 makes sense without part 1, but listen to part 1 anyway, because it's super awesome. And we're definitely going to talk about his current documentary. He's a filmmaker, among many things, and we're going to talk about his current documentary project. And I am posting in the show notes some information about where to find out more about the project. And he's running a fundraiser to support the production of the film. And that is live now-ish, depending on when you're listening. And so I'll make sure you know where to find it. Obviously, no expectation or pressure. I mostly just want to introduce my dad's awesomeness to the world. To anyone who doesn't already know him, and remind everyone of his awesomeness if you don't already know him. But I'm super proud of his current project, and so I'll make sure you know where to find that too. Thanks so much. Enjoy. Do you feel regret from not being able to do that sooner, or do you feel that you came to it at the time that was right for you, or somewhere in between? I mean, I'm listing two extremes.
I think I came to it when the timing was right. I mean, it's pointless to replay one's life and say, well, maybe if I had just not been an assistant director and I just declared poverty and started just being a filmmaker, maybe that would have gotten me somewhere. It might have, but it might not have. Also, it might have been a total dead end, And the ironies really, as much turning stones over is a really good idea. And the other part of that is you don't know what the ultimate ramifications are of choices that either you made or somebody made for you. To wit, Director's Guild. I'm working for poverty wages as a trainee, getting to know the work of an assistant director. And in my tiny little check, there'd be a couple of deductions. There'd be a deduction for the DGA pension plan. There'd be deductions for the DGA health insurance, which fortunately we had even at that time. Cut to now, really, it's because of those things that I could even be the all-immersive documentary filmmaker when I was 60.
Right.
Because the pension, besides combined with Social Security, not only allows me and your mom to live a comfortable life, but it also generates enough money so I can, on this very modest basis, push a film forward. If I've got some film equipment, and you can have a pretty good setup for even like $10,000. And so if you, for instance, the film I'm doing now with a man whom you've met, John Godinette, I filmed for the better part of 5 years. And I had to buy the drives. I have the editing system and so forth, and I would edit as I went. But it's the kind of thing that I could do with a modest amount of money set aside every month, in addition to what it took for us to live. And I can keep pushing this forward until it's shaped enough so other people will get behind me and help fund it the rest of the way. So, without the DGA pension,
right.
Health insurance, same thing,
right.
with any kind of illnesses, in our family, for instance, incredibly good coverage. And so in that sense, I feel privileged because there are a lot of people who don't have that, who might have taken a path like the one I've taken. And even in their 60s, they don't have a clear shot at making art the way they'd like to.
I feel like there is a broad referendum on capitalism that we could have right now. And we don't need to go too far into it, but what I'm thinking about a few things that you've mentioned. One is, from the beginning, you being very struck by disparity and poverty around the world. And that's certainly been something that I've observed you care immensely about. And you've taken Garrett and me to these places to film and document a lot of what's going on. And that I'm very grateful for that. on the other hand, there's the, real financial challenges around all of us, living much more privileged lives. But, your ability to do your art depends on a certain amount of financial stability. And I also was struck by, and I didn't know this, that you had done those earlier works like for UNICEF and others, that you were doing those for free. And not to make this about me, but were Garrett and I alive at that time? Were you like why not charge for that? Did you feel that you weren't ready to do it? And I don't know. I just feel like money is at the backbone of this in a way that we've never talked about. And I certainly haven't really, you need it to live, but it just seems to be so much more central in terms of what we're able to do in terms of art. But it's also very much been the subject of your art for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is that I felt I could serve that way. But the other one is kind of like just gauging the marketplace. If you offer to do something for free, never for free because there are always expenses involved. But if you could give a nonprofit who's doing really important work out there a good deal, chances are they'd send you somewhere. And that in itself was a rich experience. Yeah. I mean, as you know, from the times that you've gone with me, be it South Dakota or South Africa, and it's its own personal fulfilling project in its own right for me. So there's lots of reasons why I would do it. And I should say that they weren't always without my charging something, especially in later years, sort of with more of a reputation for doing things like that. I would charge enough to make the whole thing balance out. But by charging a little, maybe it meant that 9 months out of the year I could be doing those things, and 3 months out of the year I'd be working as an assistant director somewhere.
Right.
So,
well, I'm feeling, and I don't mean this as like a hand-wringing depressive way, but I feel as though Garrett and I could have been cheaper. Like give you a little bit more time to I was like, I didn't need those dance classes in high school. I'm sorry you moved to LA. I wasn't privy to all of the goings on, which is a luxury in itself, but I feel
I think
down a little.
As you know, when you were still very young, we made the decision to move from Los Angeles back to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. For a couple of reasons. One was family, because we had no, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever, nobody in LA. And moving to Iowa didn't seem to cut it for a number of reasons, not the least of which is, my own filmmaking aspirations. Whereas Maryland and the DC area did, because a lot of your mom's family is around here. So that was a big plus. The other thing that came out of that is it's a whole lot less expensive to live in Frederick, Maryland than in Venice, California.
Yes.
So in that respect, you were pretty cheap.
Oh, all right, great. Public school, whatever. Yeah, good. Yeah, well, you're welcome. I mostly just remember being, and this can be a separate Patreon only, where I just rant about my own problems. But I remember just being irritated because LA seemed cooler. Venice Beach versus Frederick, Maryland. I spent a lot of my youth being like, I could be a very cool LA kid right now in the movies. And I probably would have, been addicted to cocaine at 15, but I was still upset at the time. But now I see the value. I see the value of Frederick. Yeah.
Yeah. All the shimmers is not Venice Beach.
Yeah. Yes, this is true. All right. So I want to hear about your current project, and I want to hear about what it's like to be a documentary filmmaker. If we have people listening who are thinking, I'd like to be a filmmaker, or how does one become a filmmaker, or how, you described that you've, with a modest budget, been able to outfit yourself with the supplies for it. I will say that everything I'm using because you've helped advise me and like listened to me on the phone or coached me on the phone as I wandered the halls of B&H here in New York City. So what is it like being a documentary filmmaker? What do you like about it? What's tough about it? What do you recommend? What's going on? Is that a good question? What's going on?
Yeah. It's of course a multifaceted one.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing I really love about observational documentary work is the proximity the closeness you get with people or to people. Part of that is just spending the time, and John Godinett, as you know, but no one else here knows, was born in American Samoa. He and his husband ended up in the Frederick, Maryland area, where in a series of adventures and necessities, he became at some point a really good ultra marathoner. And we're talking, not just 26 miles, but 50 and 100 miles. But he also had this, he loved life and he loved doing things for the right reasons. And he loved nothing more than to find somebody along the race route who was having a difficult time getting to the finish line and just slowing down and stopping and helping to talk them through, or having, making levity, which he was really good at. And he just had this whole spirit of generosity about him that was just really remarkable. And I was attracted to him first when I read a feature article in the local newspaper. He had been diagnosed with ALS. And a number of the runners who had become his fast friends dedicated themselves, I think this was in 2017, to pushing him in a racing cart through his favorite races, all the way from ones locally here in Frederick to the Marine Corps Marathon. And I was just getting finished with Deej at that point, and I had an itchy trigger finger in terms of I really wanted to be filming again, And so I started spending time with them all. And what I thought was going to be a fairly short movie about community, these people all gathering around one of their own and giving him these moments. I got hooked by him, by his friends. And so this film about community became one a lot deeper, about love in all its complexity, whether it's domestically in his own house, or whether it's he and his running friends, or almost improbably, his husband, as members of this much older set of people in a Lions Club. And not to mention also the people here of the American Samoan community who live in the Mid-Atlantic, who were all part of the package too. So all those are, and then they had a couple of dogs. Dogs were their children.
Ginger
Ginger and Piglet. And John and Peter always had a couple of dogs, just for the last 30 years or so. And the current incarnations were Ginger and Piglet. And so when you spend that kind of time with people, you get to know them really well. And you also, and this is life lived. You could think that this is a film about death and dying, to be blunt. John left us almost a year ago now, due to ALS. But it was really a celebration of life. And it's kind of like the ticking clock of ALS is kind of like a ticking clock, but what it did was made you appreciate every moment you had. And he he took advantage of every moment he had. And what has come out of it is some really strong, emotionally strong moments between John and other people. And things were then complicated even more by virtue of the fact that COVID hit. So here is John, and his friends can't even hug him because John at this point is so respiratorily compromised. He cannot catch COVID.
Right.
So his friends would come and sit in the carport or outside some bay windows, talking with him on phones through glass windows or whatever. And Pete, because of COVID, no one dared to give Pete any release in terms, any kind of relief in caring for John.
Right.
And as incapacitated as John was becoming, to have that job 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is just, it's almost incomprehensible. So it became this story about love in its complexity in a kind of pressure cooker. And I'm privileged to have been part of that. And there were many times in which John and I, in the summer months especially, when he could be outside in his chair in a fairly spacious carport and I could maintain my distance, he and I really developed this deep relationship. And I think there are things that he may have even expressed to me that even his closest friends, maybe he didn't express so clearly. At any rate, all this means that it's going to be, I think, an incredible movie when it's done. But we're still a couple of years probably away from reaching that point. And yes, I mean, John has gone on, and I'm, for the most part, finished filming, but just, and this is sort of the more negative part of the question you asked about, the worth of it. And the challenge is money. And it has, and in comparison to, say, most of the European countries and other quote unquote industrialized countries, we pay very little for public television. And this is a film for public television. And so there are maybe 10 or 12 funders out there, Sundance, Tribeca, ITVS, some others, who are the usual suspects when it comes to funding documentaries. And it's incredibly competitive. And I'm not sure that we're going to get the money we need from them. So we're finding other sources. We've just launched a campaign local to Mid-Maryland because John had such a tremendous following of people here. And it's going to be the next 4 months, it's going to be me as a fundraiser. Mm-hmm. So it's not an ideal system. It could be better because as a first assistant, as a one-person band filmmaker, you can only do one thing at a time. You're filming, or you're editing, or you're writing proposal grant applications, or you're marketing in fundraisers, and you're getting the cuts out to various people who will give you their honest opinions and feedback. And so it's like, the wonderful thing about is that technology allows one person to do practically everything. The frustrating part is one person, all those jobs just end up getting stacked down the line. So something that might take a crew or a company of 6 or 8 people a year and a half to do may take me 6 or 7 years to do, and so it's not a perfect world. On the other hand, I can't think of anything I trade for it. And I have no problem getting up and going to work in the morning. And it's got me totally engaged. And maybe the fundraising part, not as much, certainly, as the filming and the editing. Right. But it's all part of the same package. It comes with the territory. So I embrace it, and it's where I want to be, and I'm glad I'm here doing that.
I remember calling, I think I was a week or two ago, I called and asked, how the movie was going. And you said, well, I'm a fundraiser now. You're like, okay. So you're like organizing Zoom meetings and events downtown and things like that. But if you have the links and everything for the fundraiser, we'll share it in the show notes and everything for this as well. I don't know if have you formally launched yet?
We have launched. We have a website. It's tailtwistermovie.com.
All right. TAILTWISTER I-L, Twister.
Tail.
Twistermovie.com. All right.
Yeah. It has to do, if we've got time for this.
Yeah.
It has to do with the fact that the Lions Club, where John was sort of almost accidentally admitted as a member when he and Pete were still like 20 years younger than everybody else. The Lions Club, besides having elected offices of president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, they also have an elected position called tail twister. Lion, tail twister. So this person is charged with providing the entertainment or levity at all the at all of the meetings. And boy, John was good at that. And I have a scene in which he does it to a T. So tail twister, and that's a lot of John. John was a tail twister in so many different ways, and it was kind of not only his way of. It's interesting. His way of surviving was to thrive, to get bigger than life, to embrace it, and to, as he says to one other person who needed his help in the film, he says, "Create your own happiness." And there were things about John growing up, gay in American Samoa that were really difficult. And there were memories from his past that he dealt with, but his way of dealing with it, his way of surviving them was to thrive. And but there are moments in which he's not thriving so much, and he and I have some pretty revealing conversations.
How do you? Because I've observed from a distance this level, and I haven't seen all the footage, but I've seen some of it. This level of trust he's much more than a film subject. He's a friend, very, very close friend. But I've seen you do this with other film subjects in the past, even if it's someone who you only work with for a few days. Like you're interviewing people about relatively serious matters a lot of the time, right? You're in a country where you're talking to someone who's a beneficiary of microcredit, and they've, their husband has passed away and they have no resources. So you're getting into these dark stories with people. How do you get to that level of trust? Is it just because you're a nice person, right? Does every filmmaker need that skill?
I think you have to earn it.
Okay.
I think you have to put in the time and the attention. And in the case of those, like, for instance, on the trip that you and I took to South Africa, the reason people came forward, women who were part of the microcredit program that we were covering at the time, would be as sharing as they were, was because the way that would work, because of the language challenges, would be that we had someone who was a translator who knew them well, or knew people who were part of that community in one way or another. So a lot of it would be me and that person talking in advance, ahead of time, and saying, this is what we're after. We need to ask them to share about this, and this. And often, if the key was finding the right person to do that, because if I ask a question in English, and then the person turns around and asks that question in the native language of whoever it is we're profiling, to get that flow going, quite often I say, just tell me in a couple of words kind of what they said, but don't give me a full translation. Keep the conversation between you and them. And because the conversation is going back and forth in that language, that's who they're going to look toward. That's who they're going to be speaking toward. And I kind of become a kind of clued in camera person. So it's really important to have the right person to help you do that. Because I couldn't do that. I mean, they wouldn't trust this white guy with the kind of emotional vulnerability that maybe somebody who lived in their village and knew a lot about their lives, could elicit.
Right. How about and we're nearing the end. I have one more question on this and I think I'm thinking of some serious filmmaker stereotypes. I mean, even when if it's you and then a translator and a subject, you're still there with a camera, which can be intrusive, right? And you're trying to presumably make the camera disappear. Mm-hmm. But when it's, say, just you and John or you and Deej or something like that, does having the camera there open up the possibility for honesty? Or did you luck out and John was just someone who's comfortable in front of a camera?
Well, a little of both. Yeah. John was certainly comfortable in front of a camera. But what has always struck me as I've filmed is that, to me, the camera is a much bigger deal than most people you're filming. It's been amazing to me that I can walk into a room holding a camera and we start filming, how quickly they forget that the camera's there or don't care, And it's not like I believe in fly in the wall filmmaking. There was that whole sort of it. That's the documentary apocryphal kind of theory as much as auteurism is in fiction filming, I guess. But it's there is no such thing as fly on the wall photography or filmmaking. The camera's there. People know that the camera's there. It's not a question of them. I said forget it. They don't really forget. They know it's there, but it doesn't take them long at all if the other people in the room are keenly interested in what it is they're doing or saying. Mm. It doesn't take long at all before they just accept it and go with it. No. So that's one thing that I do in my films at this point is I find ways to make it clear that this is a film, and so it might be just something off camera that I say that they respond to just occasionally or something. But right. I think that's important. I think it's important for people to understand that we've made an artificial construct here, and we're inviting people to act naturally within it. But it's never the same as if we weren't in the room.
You're still on a stage. I'm thinking back to like a theater or something. You're setting up the world as it's a theater. And I'm thinking about that both in terms of Deej and in terms of this project, where the footage that I've seen for this project anyway, you do interject every now and again. You're not a big part of either movie, but your voice is there. And we, the watchers, know that we're watching a documentary and we're hearing the director interact with the subjects. And that's not something you see in a lot of documentaries.
Yeah, it's all over the map as to whether you see it or not.
Right.
It just seems a natural way for me to work, because the story, sometimes the complexity of my being there is actually a little bit of a part of the story. So
right. I feel this reminds me of a thing that you said to me, or you've said many times, is that all cameras lie. You just want to lie a little. What's the, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. All film lies.
All film lies.
The responsibility of a filmmaker is to make it lie truthfully.
Ooh. Make it lie. Like you're telling a construct, but do it in a way that's as honest as possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
And even if I take a scene, or I choose to use this scene as opposed to that scene, or this one instead, and how I cut that scene, what are the last lines of it? What does it end on? What does it leave you with? There are a multitude of choices that filmmakers have, in the documentary filmmakers have, as to how they shape those scenes and create an overall opinion. So that's part of the honesty too, is this is a construct. This is a work of art that uses palpable human beings and human emotions. And it's a delicate, deep sense of trust that allows you to do that. But you have to be honest that that's what's happening, I think.
Okay, last thing, and then we'll do Existential Corner, is that I use filmmaking as an example when I teach programming to my students. And I say it's kind of like filmmaking and frankly, like a lot of other things, but filmmaking comes to mind because of you, where it's an art and a science, in the sense that you need to have creative vision. We spoke a lot about creating trust, being on it. What are you conveying? What's the story? All that kind of stuff. But there's also a huge technical component, which we've also talked about over the course of this conversation, including, the skills that you've picked up in your travels early on in your career to this day, where it's, figuring out how to be, you're your own cinematographer and editor. And so you need to know how to use all the software, and you need to know how to light things. And I barely know how sound works, and it's very, very complicated. What would you say are the skills that best prepare someone to be a documentary filmmaker? Like, if someone's listening now and says, I want to make a film, is it like lean in on the creativity? Is it memorize how f-stops work? What's the balance, or is it all of the above?
Well, it's just do it and be prepared for failure. Be prepared for less than 100% satisfying results. Start small. Don't take on the world in your first project. Find some little, street corner portrait of 3 minutes that you can do. I would say that's the biggest one, because the longer, the bigger, the more extensive the subject matter and the project is, the more you're going to complicate your life, and you still have to live with how you did it. So it's much better. And I think that's where traveling internationally and doing these short documentaries really helped me, is even if I was, I really screwed that up, that it doesn't have a lasting scar like it would be for a 90-minute feature documentary. And then, this particular scene still looks, like crap.
Right.
So find ways of making your mistakes and with modest projects, and you'll learn what you have to learn. And be part of documentary communities, because there are people out there in online communities like the D Word and a lot of other organizations. There's where people will offer help, and if you have a technical quandary, there are people who will watch something with you and counsel you on how to do it better. And it's really a supportive world. The documentary filmmaking world is. We're all competitors in a way, but we're collaborators in a bigger way, I think. So I'd say that's it. Start small. And
I think that's piece of having community around you is something that maybe we don't think about.
Especially since here I am in my office with my editing machine here, and it's like I can go for weeks, if not months, without much human interaction.
Right.
That's not good.
So I hear. Well, and here I am demanding that you stare at a screen even longer. All right. I believe we have come to Existential Corner. Are you ready for Existential Corner?
No, but let's go.
Okay, right. So you can definitely decline to answer or give a non-answer or whatever you want. But we have a number of lightning round existential questions that we're aiming for, 1 to 2 sentence answers, but we've had guests give a word. We've had guests talk for 15 minutes. So it's a broad corner.
Okay.
All right. You ready? Here we go. All right. Number 1, what's your biggest regret? They're really easy.
None.
Whoa. Okay.
Biggest regret. It's impossible for me to even know. I'm so focused in on what I do now that I don't trouble myself with a lot of, well, gee, if I had only, chosen this in life rather than that.
That's a good answer. This is the 10th time I've asked this question of someone, and not that it's competition, but that might be the best answer I've heard so far. All right. What is your biggest fear?
Failure.
Okay. What are you most proud of in life?
My art. No. No, I take that one back. I am incredibly proud of you and your brother.
That was not a loaded question. I'm not aiming.
Your mother, who is the very best yoga teacher this side of the Mississippi, at least, if not both sides of the Mississippi.
Right. And
she
perhaps in the
correct me as to how I'm saying Mississippi, but that's another story.
Are you saying it
wrong? But no, both of the creative and affirmative lives that both you and Garrett have in very different ways are just, I'm immensely proud of the territory you've both carved out for yourselves.
Well, thank you. And I would say that you're also, I'm more proud of your art than I am of myself. So, so there's that.
Well, we need to work on that.
All right. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Okay. What is one secret desire for your life? Like something you hope for your life, wish for your life that you don't normally talk about?
Enough money so I don't have to keep pounding the pavements for funding.
Right. Okay. What is one piece of useful advice that you've gotten over the course of your life, or that you've given someone and you were like, wow, that was good advice? Or a piece of advice that you kind of hang on to in your mind as you go about your day?
This is going to contradict something I said earlier. Your greatest fear being failure.
Yeah.
I don't think that's actually true. I think the biggest thing that I can point to is acknowledging failure, living with failure, and realizing it's not the end of the world, and there are that it's all part of the path, and some parts of it work out, others don't, but failure is all relative, and so no, I don't think it is actually the thing I fear the most. Yeah, I'm trying not to get into the 15-minute version.
Well, I'll take 15 minutes. Yeah, we have editing capabilities if I'm like, forget it.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things I like about documentary filmmaking is, to try not to make us X-rated, but I shoot the crap out of a subject. I mean, I really cover it. I mean, in a way that's maybe, I like to say that people's greatest strengths are also their greatest faults. And one of mine is I'm thorough, I'm complete, I'm burrow and get a three-dimensional possibility of whatever it is I want the film to be. And the weakness of that is you create for yourself an enormous mountain that you then have to sculpt and dig yourself out of. So that's a story that's something that I haven't succeeded in really taking to heart and learning, because I always do it.
Yeah.
Back in the days when we were filming for Prudential Lines around South America, to every single other project, to our credit in the 90s, and then Deej and this one too.
Yeah.
I have an incredible amount of footage.
Yeah. And the viewers can't see this, but it's all in hard drives around you right now. Yeah.
And so, so that's my greatest strength. If I manage to get through all of that, I think it's a stronger movie. But I think there are times in which I wish I were more disciplined about saying, okay, you've got to move on,
Okay. Well, I'm thinking of all the times that we, and it was awesome, again, that you took Garrett and me on these trips to go film with you for, several weeks at a time at some far-flung location. And I have many memories of sitting on the side of like a highway at the end of a day, and we're exhausted because we've been interviewing all day and doing all these things. And you see the sun go past a thing in a certain way. You say, I got to get a shot of this. And so then you go out and shoot, the horizon and the highway and I'm just like sitting on the ground, you're 12 years old with a stick, and because you're like, I need this footage. So then you have 2 hours of sunset footage, in South Africa, whatever.
That's me.
Yeah.
And I love to film. I love the interaction of filming.
What kind of interaction?
That in itself is its own adrenaline rush. I mean, you can think back that night or the next morning or whatever, did I get what I need and so forth. But just the experience of doing it, it's like a high in its own right.
Is
and
the
I still
interaction
remember actually somebody, I don't think you met this person. It was on a different South African trip. No, it was actually Haiti. I was in Haiti, and the person who was coordinating things for me and also my translator, as I hopped into the car and hopped out of the car and back into the car, so forth, she looked at me and said, "You're like the ever ready battery," which I took to be a great compliment.
Yeah. Where was I going to go with that? I had something. Okay. So fear is not something to be afraid of. It's something to, not fear. Failure is something to embrace and try and be okay with and learn from. So what is your greatest fear in that case?
My greatest fear is not taking advantage of the lessons failure gives you.
There we go. Okay. All right. We kind of answered one. I was going to ask, what's like a skill? Let's see. I have three more. What's a skill that you have that you think you're very, like a special skill that you have that most people don't have? And it can be as specific or strange or not as you wish. And you kind of said that you over prepare, you overshoot, but I don't want to impose that answer on this question. Like, what are you exceptionally good at?
Camera work, I think. I love rectangles. I love finding the right angle and being, and framing it with somebody, and then being able to move with the camera and move with the subject, and just the interaction, the intensity of the interaction is an incredibly fulfilling moment in and of itself.
That reminds me of my question. So you said it's the interaction of filmmaking. Is that the interaction between you and the camera and the subject, you and the camera and the scenery? Who's interacting with whom in that scenario?
Me and it's an interaction between me and the subject ultimately. But the camera is part of it as to how you frame it and what the subject and the context, visual context, spatial context lends to it is all part of it too. It really is living in the moment. And the intensity of living in the moment, because what you're filming, I've tried this before when I've missed a moment, and I'll try to come back around and I'll ask somebody a question that will hopefully lead them into saying the same thing, or I'll just sometimes even say, "Can you repeat that? Because I blew the shot." Never works.
Yeah.
Never works. But the other good thing to keep in mind is, even if something is not so terribly skillfully shot, if it's a meaningful human moment, that's what counts. And I have to keep reminding myself not to have too much hubris as a camera person. And that sometimes just the fact you can hear this person say that, and even if the camera's askew, it's such a meaningful moment that it deserves to be in the film. And maybe you as a camera person will go like this, but in the context with a good editor, a poorly shot moment may be irreplaceable, and that's okay.
What are you most hopeful about?
Young people. And by young people, generations younger than mine or your mom's. I'm even confused when who's a millennial and who's a Gen X and who's a what. But, especially in the last couple of years, last few years, just the mess that things are in our own political system, and just the total screw ups that happen, again, mostly for political reasons in terms of battling COVID, and what's happening now in Ukraine, and what's happening. There's a Washington Post article just today about the fact that there are only 300 right whales left in the world. And there is these people intensively fighting to to help the species survive. I'm feeling, in a way, in the last few years, more intensely than I have all my life, that we've done a piss poor job of leaving the world to you. So you're our hope that you'll find ways to bridge the political divides and to get people on board with what it really takes for a sustainable planet and a just society. And that's asking a lot. But I think, there are times in which I think, well, for all of us who were in the 60s and 70s and didn't trust anybody over 30, and we're going to fix things, and all the incredible hubris that we had as a generation, I don't know that we've gotten that far. And so my hope is you and Garrett and the things you do and your compatriots will do a better job.
I'm wondering if millennials and the rest of us are just repeating what you went through, which is we have the hubris. We say, we'll change the world and this and that. I don't know. COVID knocked hubris out of most of us. So, so there's that.
Well, I'm going to butcher it, but Martin Luther King's statement about the events, that's the part I'm missing, arc toward justice.
Right.
Was the essential optimism that he had. And the fact is that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, gay marriage was barely on the horizon.
Right.
There are ways in which people are much more accepting of each other than they ever have been. But then with the silos of social media, where we don't have to talk to each other, we'll just listen to the people who reinforce their own universes. You have a whole new challenge that we never had to face,
Yeah, it's not pretty over there.
Yeah.
All right, I have one final existential question, but before I do that, I want to add one in just to circle back on where we started this conversation, where we said, well, you were drawn to film early on, the auteur vision of a director and all of that. Why now, from the vantage point of today, looking back and to your work now and looking forward, like why film? What is it about film, movies, capturing this moment on camera, like you were describing with the human experience? Why that and not writing a story about it or still photography or a painting or something else? Like, why film?
Well, the easiest answer is that's what I'm good at. I'm not a visual artist, and
yeah.
Photography, maybe. Music, not. I don't know that one art form is essentially, as an art form, is better than another, but certainly as a historical record, and certainly as a way of documenting how things were. I mean, as ghastly as it is to watch, CNN replay images of what's happening in the Ukraine, there's a literalness and a palpability and that's just undeniable. And even though images can be made to sell a certain point of view, I mean, Leni Riefenstahl was Hitler's filmmaker, and she did that very well. And people can still do that. And I'm sure that people in Russia working for Mr. Putin are doing that as we speak. But still, the immediacy with which we're documenting what's going on there, and the fact that there are people on the ground who are part of the World Court in The Hague, who are on the ground in the Ukraine, and who are documenting things. I like to believe that the literalness of that human historical record is something that will ultimately support justice. That even if people try to create their own little fictions about it and so forth, that the overwhelming number of people who are bearing witness to what's going on, the truth will out.
Okay, last question. What is the meaning of life?
Human interaction, human stories, expression of what it is that makes us such an incredibly complex and frustrating and wonderful species. And I'm not even going so far as to say, how did we come into being and what the longer trajectory of that is. I'm just saying in the moment, or maybe as John would say, says, enjoy his racing advice is enjoy yourself, enjoy the view, because you'll never know whether you're going to come by this way again. And that was his whole philosophy, was seize the moment, and make the absolute most of it. So
that's a good meaning of life.
Yeah. Seizing the moment, I think.
I have and I've told you this before, but I'll say it again. I have, so I've only met John. I only met him once. You arranged a dinner for us to go spend some time together, which I was very grateful for. I guess it was before COVID, of course. And it was at a Chinese restaurant. And so we had a fortune, and I kept the fortune because I'm crazy, but I kept the fortune, and the fortune said, "It is a nice day." And I have it on my nightstand. And I think of John every day, every morning when I wake up, and every night when I go to bed, and I see it there. And I think, you know what? It is a nice day. And we're lucky to be here. So very consistent, I would say, with the message that you just shared.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I feel like first of all, I've taken up your whole day and the whole day of anyone who's listening to this. Where can people find your work, your goings on? We mentioned tailtwistermovie.com for the fundraiser. And is there more information about the movie and other stuff on there? Or are there other places people can go to find out more about your work?
For that movie, that's the place at this point. And it's not a terribly complete, extensive one. We're building it out as we go, but it'll give people the idea, I think.
Okay. You're also, a website designer, among other things. So, and then if people want to watch your previous work, is deejmovie.com? Is that where they can find information about, because it still airs and it's streaming in various places, right?
Yes.
Okay.
deejmovie.com is where you go to find out about the film, and there are various ways of acquiring it. You can stream it. You just have to sort of, follow the menus. But yeah, that's
excellent. So we'll put a link to that as well. deejmovie.com. And your website is roymedia.com. Is that up to date?
Okay. No, it's actually still out there. It's horrible. And I keep on my to-do list is saying, take it down.
Really? I like RoyMedia.
Or have roymedia.com actually, link just to Deej for the time being until I have a chance to build it out.
Right.
Oh, no.
Okay. Well, now this is the number one way to get people to go to a website, is to say, don't go to that website.
Right.
And then
it's like 15 years old, 15 or 20 years old. And nobody wants to see a website that's 15 or 20 years old.
I do.
No, you
websites
don't.
That are 15 to 20 years old remind us of how far we've come on the internet. And because my website hasn't been updated.
What is my greatest regret?
Yeah.
Still having roymedia.com up there.
Okay. Well,
I think on Monday morning, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it down, because now it's out there. So
yeah. Well, this is going to air. Let's see. By the time it airs, you have actually about 2 weeks to take it down. So
Good.
I can also just cut this whole part, but we'll see. For the right price. You can also, listeners, go to IMDb and look up Robert Roy, ROOY, and see all the cool stuff he worked on when he was a first AD, and be like, oh, I saw that movie, and other things like that. So, but all right, tailtwister.com is the main spot, and we'll put a link to that below. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Dad.
You are so welcome.
I was going to say Rob, but that felt weird. So thank you for doing the show. And thank you to everyone who's listened all season. I'm very grateful that you've tuned into our little project, and I hope you all keep majoring in everything. Bye. And that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to Majoring in Everything. I'm your host, Andrea Jones-Roy, and Majoring in Everything is a proud member of the World's Smartest Podcast Network. Be sure to check out worldsmartestpodcastnetwork.com and our partner shows. We are edited by Eric P. Stipe, who says that I need an outro, so I'm making one. Eric, does this count? Are you happy? I hope so. Thanks again for listening. Keep majoring in everything. Bye.